We have a good group here today, Daniel.
All right, let's go ahead and give them what they came for then, shall we?
Let's get started. Well, thank you everyone for joining on this fantastic Wednesday. Hopefully your summer where the weather is not quite as chilly, but we're definitely glad you were able to make time with us today. So we've got a great topic, cracking the team dynamics code with Daniel. So Daniel Schofler is a principal consultant at Improving with experience in e-commerce, telemedicine, and of course, being in Houston, oil and gas. As an electrical engineer turned software developer, he prides himself on highly disciplined development, leading to more effective products and processes. He's a problem solver at heart and leverages his strengths in applying industrial theory to the challenges of software development. Among the key challenges facing development is the communication gap. And like I said, a man after my own heart. I love this topic. Daniel has taken to blogging and public speaking and consulting to help bridge the gap and demystify technology in our world. When not engaged with tackling the gap or coding, you'll find Daniel playing with his 5 children, reading or tinkering, whether in the workshop or in a computer. So today's webinar is definitely going to have some interactive components, and we want to encourage everyone who joined us today to participate in real time. Feel free to join active discussion in the QA, and we'd also like to encourage everyone to take the time to come off of mute and actively engage in the discussion throughout the presentation. We're learning through our different Zoom technology. So if you're not able to come off mute, raise your hand and I will manually remove you from the mute button and allow you to talk. We want to encourage everyone to provide their thoughts on team dynamics. And of course, being a discussion, do not hold your questions to the end of the presentation. Please actively participate in questions and Daniel will be able to respond in real time. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel and we'll take some time to learn about team dynamics. So thank you so much for hosting us today, Daniel.
Thank you for facilitating, Emily. I appreciate the assistance. Hello, welcome one and all to Cracking the Team Dynamics Code. Now, today, our intent, of course, is going to be talking about these dynamics, these things that we call good teams having, right? And we're going to talk about, of course, why they matter, because if we started the conversation without explaining why we're talking about it, I might be wasting your time. So in an effort to make good use of that, we'll talk about that first, and then we'll jump into how do we talk about and define these dynamics, and that'll be a spot where I'd really love to have some of your interaction. And then as we go forward, my goal today is for you to leave with a couple of small actionable steps, maybe some questions to ask yourself and your team. You can use exiting this meeting to go start building your own team's culture better with the dynamics that you personally would like to see. Now, about the man standing in front of you. My name is Daniel Schofler. I'm a Christian husband, father of 5, an improver, and most recently an author. And one of the things that I've tried desperately in my career to get my head around is, why is software development so difficult? And the truth is, it's not because of the code. That's actually pretty easy. The trouble is the people. Now, not so much that they're the trouble, but that understanding people, getting different people with different values, different priorities to collaborate effectively and consistently is difficult. And part of that challenge is identifying what it is that we value differently, so we can have a conversation about it, ideally, and come to a common ground. And these are the kind of dynamics we're talking about, the kind of pattern of interactions you and your compatriots will have while working on a team. Now, it's been widely studied, and even the Harvard Business Review has found and published statistics stating that about 38% fewer defects occur on a team with a positive team culture, one that builds each other up. They're 15% more productive, not just from less bugs, but from actually doing more work. And of course, that's why there's been this whole big hubbub of how do we build a good culture? And frankly, what do we mean by that? Now, right now, we're in the period of layoffs, right? We've had a bunch of big tech companies letting people go. But there is a silver lining that prior to that, we had more or less this desert of talent for certain qualifications. Well, these team dynamics play a role in finding and keeping the best talent too. You see, you can expect about 100% double the amount of applications to a company, to a place that has positive team dynamics, because the people in those dynamics will talk about it. In fact, it's one of the greatest strengths I've found in working for places like Improving. The people who work here love it. They don't like working for Improving, they love it. That's an emotional reaction, and it causes them to talk about their work differently. That discussion changes how the people they're talking to in their network think about the company. Do I want to go work for a place like that? I certainly do. And just think about it from the terms of like the golden rule, right? Which would you rather work in? A place where people love the work they do, or a place where like, it's all right? Given that you're going to be spending half your waking life at it, I would encourage you, definitely go for the one where people are raving about how good it is. But come into it with eyes wide open, because just because I'm raving about it doesn't mean it's going to be a great fit for you. And this allows us to transition into one of the most critical components of this talk then, which is, what are these dynamics? And this is a moment where I want the audience, come off mute, jump in that QA, spam me, please, and tell me the kind of stuff you remember hearing when people talk about, oh, we want a good team culture.
And feel free to use the raise hand function so I can unmute you just in case you're not able to unmute yourself. All right, Terrence.
Yeah, I remember having worked in restaurant industry, and like they were for a family, it was like for a family. And I noticed that whenever I transitioned over into IT, that whenever people say family oriented, that means they're going to make you work way too much for salary. Like it was just like a weird transition where you're like, where they're like, oh, these guys mean they want to yell at you. Okay, that's not good.
Yep. So on that, let me build on this. That actually gets us on a couple of really critical elements of these dynamics. What they mean in different contexts shifts. Inside of the food op industry, treating each other like family had a very different connotation than it does in corporate. And so listening just for the words means we need to go a little deeper. What do they mean when they say these things? And that'll get us as close to the concept of insights of mindset and values that we'll need to talk about after we get some concrete behaviors. Because as Terrence just mentioned there, right? Oh, that means they want to yell at me. That doesn't sound good. Even though families might have yelling, that's not a behavior that produces a positive team dynamic. Wherein this is my brother, I'm going to make certain he's covered, is a very different dynamic and a different set of behaviors. That's a fantastic observation, how those two same words have completely different meanings depending upon where they were applied. Good addition. Emily, do we have another one?
Not in the chat yet, but I was curious, do these dynamics, do they need to be actions? A
fantastic question, kind of building on this. Do the dynamics need to be actions? Frankly, no. But in the context of this conversation, we're going to be talking about the actions a lot because the dynamics come from the actions. So think of trust. That's a popular one I've seen come up as a positive team dynamic to desire, that the team members trust one another. But if you think about trust, how does that happen? It happens from someone repeatedly keeping their word, the action there being the keeping of a promise. Of course, that changes depending upon the promise being made, but the consistency of the behavior produces the dynamic, that feeling, the belief, if you will, that would come from the action. And the dynamic is that belief, that feeling of, I can trust my team members. Great question there. I see another raised hand.
Yep. Sherry, go ahead, Sherry. You should be able to speak now.
Just different egos get in the way.
Oh,
a lot.
Ain't that the truth? So kind of building on that dynamic that can come from different egos clashing in the room is the dynamic of, I am always right, and so I have to fight for what I believe in? Or is it, there might be more than one right answer, and the way we get there is through a meritocratic discussion. Those dynamics, the meritocracy or the fiat, or I should say fiefdoms, has very different flavors in the way people interact. And if they believe they have to defend their turf, they're going to behave in one way. And if they believe that what will win is the best idea, they're going to work in a different. Fantastic observation there.
So would you say teamwork may be considered a dynamic, kind of one of the things that you're looking at?
Yeah. Teamwork could definitely be one of those where it deals with, is it important that I do this or that we do this? And how you think about the work then manifests in the pattern of teamwork.
Okay.
So kind of building on these discussions, here are some of the most common answers I've seen when I've asked people to help me build up the idea for this, right? Of course, you have teamwork, which we just discussed. You have accountability. People take accountability, responsibility for their actions, for their choices and their results. I've heard generally a positive team described as a positive team. Now that, of course, could mean optimistic. It could mean that they are positively reinforcing and encouraging, or it could just be that people are happy to be there. Of course, I mentioned this one as trust. This one, in my opinion, is absolutely critical for some really effective teamwork behaviors. You, of course, have psychological safety. Is it safe for me to share my concerns, to share when I have messed up? Collaboration, right? Do we work together? Do we design together? The collaboration and the idea of a meritocracy go very close together, in my opinion. Of course, you have autonomy. Is the team autonomous, right? Are they allowed to go out and run on their own and make their own decisions? Or are they micromanaged? And that is another one that I see coming up as I want to be on a team that gives me autonomy. One of the ones that's becoming very important lately is dignity. Can we treat people of different walks, different experiences, different beliefs with dignity in the context of work? And it's harder than it might sound. I work with a bunch of really brilliant Indian engineers. One of the things I constantly need to do to respect and dignify them is to allow them to take the time to frame and discuss what they're thinking, because they're expressing themselves in a second language. They speak more than I do. And the way I can build dignity in the team is to treat that with respect rather than just rushing through the most efficient way to get the meeting done. Because I believe that it's not just my ideas. And of course, I mentioned that last one there. Respecting others builds up the ability of those others to contribute too. But for the purpose of our discussion today, I want to highlight 3 of them. Psychological safety, I hear coming up all the time. And absent it, a lot of other good team behaviors can't manifest. Like unto it is trust. If the team members don't trust each other, many of the collaborative value you get from the team, the stuff that becomes the team produces greater than the sum of its parts, cannot happen without that human trust. And lastly, autonomy, because I believe that especially in the software development industry, is a really big driving factor, because these engineers, these people want to have freedom over certain creative endeavors. It's just that those creative endeavors, instead of being artistic in nature, tend to be process-oriented or design-oriented. They want to achieve something they see as a possible future, but they want to be able to choose how they do it themselves. So let's talk, what are these dynamics? And with the psychological safety, I kind of hinted at it, right? Psychologically safety, I can't measure it directly, but I can measure whether it's present in a team based upon how they might answer a couple of questions. Is it safe to admit your mistakes? If the answer is no, we probably don't have psychological safety, because part of that is the willingness to become vulnerable, admitting mistakes. I did wrong. You have the right to judge me because I admit I did wrong. And if I'm not willing to do that, I'm absent a degree of psychological safety. Okay, building on that, ask how the team treats failures. How does management treat them? Because frankly, a lot of times the failures on the team scope get bubbled out, and how that's will tell the team how they have to cover their bases. Am I going to stretch and try and strive for something just out of my reach? Or am I going to incrementally walk up the ladder to try and avoid pain? Psychological safety can be measured on how the team anticipates a response to failure. Autonomy, similar kind of deal, right? I can't measure it directly except by asking questions. Are the individuals on the team free to direct their own work? Is the team really self-organizing? Are they driving towards the product? Do they understand enough to do it? Now, of course, autonomy is not the end-all be-all, because you still need trust. And again, how do you measure trust? That's an invisible link in the strength of the relationships. Are people willing to extend trust and to take an appropriately estimated risk on the work of another so that they can do their own best work? Do people trust each other? Are they being managed or are they being led? If people are being managed, it's very likely they're not going to extend trust. They're going to extend process. No, you need to fill out this form in 3 forms. No, we're not going to let you do that because we haven't gotten approval for it yet. Versus, are they being led? Hey, here's the goal. What can we do to go get it? That plays very close to autonomy, but it's, am I willing to trust the team with going and pursuing the goal without me having to direct the action? And so I'll make the following statement, that these dynamics arise from habits. Now, the habit being any repeated action to a certain repeated stimulus. I walk into the kitchen and I see a cookie jar. Stimulus. I walk into the kitchen and I see a cookie jar and begin to want a cookie. Stimulus. I walk into the kitchen, there's no cookie jar, but I still want that cookie. Habit. That repeated pattern of something has happened, here's how I act, can build up the anticipation of the team to what will happen in the future. That these dynamics of psychological safety, of autonomy, of trust all arise from a future-looking question about what has already happened. Do I expect future others to treat me well? Have they done it in the past? Do I expect future-looking to be able to choose where I'm going to go? Was I allowed to do it last time? Trust is built on the repeated behaviors. Hey, he kept his word. He's probably going to do it this time. Hey, that last time I was overextended, he came in and helped me out. I can trust him to do it again. He's got my back. These future-looking questions inform our dynamics and build our cultures almost invisibly because our brain is constantly optimizing for thought. It wants to spend thought only on the intentional stuff. And so it creates habits as a placeholder, a shortcut to reason. Our job then is to become aware of the habits we have built from the interactions our teams have had over the past. A team that had a terrible manager who did nothing but yell and scream at them every time a tiny little task wasn't completed down to the last check mark will not suddenly open up to the friendly, good leader who's trying to encourage them to own their own work. They have been scarred. They have been scared. And so we have to anticipate and understand where they came from to help lead them into something better. But these dynamics are only really half the equation, right? The team dynamics are characteristics that come from the behavior of that group. And as a result, they kind of take on this gestalt, a amalgam of let's smash all of these things together and repeat them over time so that my interactions with the QA and the QA's interactions with the Scrum Master and the Scrum Master's interaction with me flavor how all of us talk during a meeting we're all in. But they all come from something inside our heads. How I choose to respond to the QA getting a little snippy with me because I wrote a bug, oops, is informed by my personal values and mindset. How am I thinking about this problem? Is a bug the end of the world or is it a minor annoyance? If I believe it's a minor annoyance and the QA believes it's the end of the world, they're going to run around screaming like I broke their leg. And I'm going to run around like, hey, why are we freaking out about this? And if I can't keep that in mind, it's going to impact our interaction. And so what we need to recognize is that these values that occur in my head and adjust my personal interactions play out in the dynamics of the team, but also in what the team therefore values. This is what I would define as a team's culture. It's a set of common dynamics and common values. These values are the things which inform what behaviors we will accept, what behaviors we will correct, and what behaviors we would encourage. Accept, correct, or encourage. These are the things that are defined by the values and the mindset we bring into our conversations. Hey, you can't yell at people in here. That's not how we do things, is a corrected behavior. I'll accept you being completely quiet in a meeting because it's okay for you not to contribute. Hey, everyone's really smart here, but we don't know how to solve the problem. What do you think? I encourage you to jump in, to collaborate. That's how these cultures impact and modify what we're going to do individually. And everyone's had that experience where they're jumping into a team and what was expected didn't line up with what we thought we were getting into. The concept that Terrence mentioned up at the beginning of the talk, that family-oriented culture. Does family-oriented mean your brother and sister in the service line is going to have your back and make certain we all get there together? Or is it going to mean that your manager expects to be having permission to yell at you like he was mad at you as a sibling? The value set wasn't the same, even though we might describe it similarly. So how do we build something then better out of that? Well, the normal way we build something is we start thinking, hey, this isn't as good as it could be. Let's make a plan. And of course, that's the next step. I get an idea. I make a plan. And then there's execution, and I try it. And very often, if we don't control these inputs really, really well, we fall flat on our face. That wasn't what I wanted. Those weren't the results that mattered. For a deep performing team, what this really looks like is hitting a plateau. I was chugging, and I make this change, and it's supposed to improve things. And I go and I do it, and then I look around and I'm still where I was. The goal in these behaviors is not to repeat things ad nauseum, right? If we kept doing the same thing, keep tweaking our process, keep changing how we report our stuff, keep telling us to throw things over the wall to the QA, we're going to get the definition of insanity, which makes me ask, what's wrong with your head? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We need to do something fundamentally different to get us out of the cycle and out of, honestly, the valley of performance that our current culture puts us into, right? Without intentional work, your culture will represent the lowest maintenance form for the values that you hold. Because if you don't take the trouble to encourage better behaviors, if you don't take the trouble to correct not so good behaviors, you're going to be left holding the bag of whatever's there. It takes active and intentional work to build something better so that the team can grow in the maturity to maintain the new base level of excellence. And so, using the same process, what we really need to do is start with a new set of ideas. That's what this talk is. This is the new set of ideas about what it means to work on a culture, what these dynamics entail, and how you individually can most definitely make an impact on it. The next thing you'll need to do is to adjust values, and not just yours, but the team you're part of. Because after all, if we don't have new values, we won't be able to correct or adjust the behaviors of the team, because we won't know what to encourage, what to suggest against, and what to accept. Because changing the values changes where each of those lines are. Of course, with new ideas, we'll be able to change our process. And these are the action steps I'm intending to leave you with. That I can't project the new values for you, but I can suggest some ways to start acting on them once you get them. And of course, instead of smashing our face into a wall or getting stuck on a plateau, we'll be in the money. And so with that, here is now the action steps. Start with the end in mind. A man much wiser than I by the name of Stephen Covey wrote in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that highly effective people start with the end in mind. This is the critical thing to do to begin to create the shared vision, the shared new values that your team would need to have. And it starts with a very simple question. What kind of team do we want to be? And I emphasize we, that pronoun, intentionally, because this is not a decision you can make on your own. Certainly, if you're the leader of the team, you have a lot of influence there. But even if you're not the scrum master or the team lead or any number of other things, you individually have an influence in this point. And it might just be asking the question. Remember, it takes intentional work for the team to change. And that question, unless it's asked out loud, may never get answered. And without that answer, we can't direct all of our efforts towards the better tomorrow. And speaking of better tomorrow, we need to take a real sober look about where we are today. This one I find is actually somewhat difficult. because you have to become aware of something that is so common that you basically put on blinders to it. This is rewriting the habits, or at least becoming aware of the program that's already there. How do people respond to certain stimulus? What kind of stimuluses are common? What are the behaviors that are leading to not so good outcomes? Things like the QAs and the devs fighting over the definition of a bug. That has happened, and it leads to very certain dynamics between the two parties. But you have to start with, where do I think we want to be? And then get an idea of where you are today, because you got a distance to walk. But if you're, aiming for the mountains and you're over here by the ocean, you might have a while. But if you're in the foothills, that's easier to encourage the team to move on because shorter distance left to go. But once you have both an idea of where you want to go and where you are today, you can start forming the through line, which makes it very easy then to define what new behaviors might we need to get there. Now, critically here, we're talking about team dynamics, right? But behaviors are inherently individualistic. What do I do when? How do I behave? Because that's the level of control that any individual has. I cannot make him do that. I have 5 kids. I can't make my 2-year-old do anything. I can encourage, I can control, I can threaten, and I don't like to do that last one, but I cannot force him to do it unless I literally am the one actually doing it, picking him up and playing robot with him. He has to do it. These behaviors have to be in the hands of your teammates and you, because you can't make them do it. No big surprise. In fact, I think none of us really want to make them do it. We really wish they would do it, but we're not willing to sit there in their head and drive them like a mech. So what new behaviors do we need to get there? We need them, not the individual. And so the individual's behaviors are changed to orient towards a group's goal. In orienting them to a group's goal, each individual on the team may change in a different way. If we are having, for example, a challenge of throughput with the team, we cannot get tickets consistently flowing, they get stuck in a status. We might look at that status and realize that we need to shift the balance of work and put some more back on the developers and have the QA stand up at a higher level when they're doing their work. Or we might go the other way and say, developers, y'all are going too deep into the weeds, stop looking for edge cases and let the specialist QA go find them and tell you about them. But it is the group that owns the culture, and their behaviors together are towards the goal of that new culture. And each of the individuals needs to adjust to meet the group's needs as well as what their needs are. And so the last question we ask is, what's the mindset that helps engender these behaviors? The what do I need to encourage? What do I need to accept? And what do I need to correct for? That's very much linked to today. Where are we today? What behaviors are already going on? And as a result of the new behaviors I want, what do I need to do as both backstop and forestop to encourage and pull people along, right? The whole concept of leading animals. Sometimes you get them a switch on the back to get them moving in the direction to avoid pain. But you also try and have a carrot extended out in front of them that they want to go for, the encouragement. And so find ways to build up these mindsets, to actively and intentionally value the new behaviors, to celebrate them when they're present and when people are doing the right thing all of a sudden. That might mean that if you're trying to target collaboration, hey, you did great because you jumped in at the last minute here, rather than taking on a new ticket, doing more work, to work with the QA to ensure what we had already committed to got done. Well done. Calling that out in a sprint or in demo and saying this guy made the difference is a great example of a recognition reward. Now, not everyone on your team likes those, so use a good system. But people want to be recognized. They want to be acknowledged and appreciated for what they're doing. Find an effective way to do that, and you've got your carrot. So let's talk brass tacks. How do we build together? Because I said all of these things are the team owning, but I said an individual could start it. How? Nice and simple. Have a discussion. No, seriously, just meet up and talk. This could be over lunch. It doesn't have to be even super formal. Heck, you could probably accomplish this over 6 weeks if you met with one person on your team once a week for lunch and met with a different person each time and got this conversation started. But I would strongly encourage you, make it a face-to-face conversation. COVID and remote work has made that difficult. I understand. But there's something valuable in being able to see that person on the other side laugh or snort or look at you a little strange in the middle of this interaction that helps you to build it more effectively. Remember, we're talking about the stuff living inside their head that they may not have thought about. And so gently teasing on those strings to pull out more of what they believe is really a delicate game, not to be afraid of, but one to invest intentionally in. And being in person, investing that time of you are important enough to me that I want to meet with you can be a great way to demonstrate that. Now, for an agile team, one that's practicing agile or Scrum or any number of these related frameworks, you practically have a meeting for this built in. It's called your retrospective. The trick is to not just use the retrospective to focus on process, because there are 3 layers at which you can solve challenges: tech, process, and the last one, the biggest one, the one with the greatest impact, is at the people layer. Being able to help people have a retrospective on, and this is important, individuals and their interactions, hello, our dynamics, is completely legit, in line with the stuff in the Agile Manifesto. It's our first trade-off: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So don't be afraid to approach it and talk about it like that. And here's some ways that I've approached it in our own retrospectives that I found were reasonably effective. Y'all remember that word cloud from earlier? The one about psychological safety, autonomy, dignity, respect, all of that? Use it as a warm-up. Ask people, hey, how do we define a positive team dynamic? Just ask. Now, collect those answers for later. We don't want to lose them. But start that way. Start the conversation easy. It's not about changing the world. It's about adding a drop to the bucket. Because you want to start small. You want to shock people because we don't like change. People don't like change if they can avoid it at all possible. But if you approach it simple, hey, what do you think this is? Oh, sure, I'd love to tell you about my opinion. Let me get on my soapbox and tell you about everything I've known since my grandfather told me. People love to be able to talk about their opinions when you can get them in an environment where they believe it will be listened to, respected, and valued. Starting with this word cloud exercise as a way to break the ice is a good way to get them started without having to get everything at once. But don't let it end there, because again, that new culture has to have new behaviors. And what that word cloud does is to start describing the values, the mindset that we want to influence. So go back to that word cloud exercise sometime. Maybe after the team has gelled a little more and has started getting used to these weird questions you ask them. And ask them then to go back and say, hey guys, here was what we said last time. This is what a positive team culture is. Cool. Identify ways we could behave that would exemplify that culture. What could we do that would say we're that? This will spur some thought. Give them some time on this one. But it's a great activity. Just have them brainstorm everything they can. Drop it on a whiteboard. Then as a team, pick 1 or 2 of those characteristics that we say, I really want this. I really want to be technically excellent. I really want to be known for focusing on user experience. Okay, so we want to demonstrate a customer orientation. We want to thrive in excellence. Fantastic. What's that look like? And asking them to then go and identify. So we've got all of these example behaviors we just created, but for you personally, how could you do that? Or if you don't know how to do it for yourself, what would you recommend I change to do more of that? How would we make who we are by being what we do? Because the longer you act in a pattern, the more likely it is to cement itself into a habit, and the more it will reiterate and feed back into your own thoughts and values of, no, this is the way we do it. This is the way we do it because we do it this way because of this value. And the more you can get people to actively practice what we say to ourselves, this is important, the better it will take, the better they'll understand that value, and they will learn new ways to apply it. But you have to start with a statement. These are values I think we should have. This is what I think an example of walking it out might look like. Here's how I personally can go and do it. And you take it from this broad intellectual concept and you slowly hone it down to, here are some examples that we personally came up with and believe would be valid, to now I've picked, it's just this handful I really care to work on right now. I'm not trying to boil the ocean. And here, right here, are 2 behaviors I could take in the next 2 weeks to go and change. And I'll write them as, hey, instead of doing this, I will try. And it really is just about helping people to take this gigantic concept and eat the elephant one bite at a time. And of course, this new behaviors and new mindset kind of feed back into each other. But it all boils down to this same basic answer. How do you know what your team values? How do they define it? Just ask. Simple, straightforward. No magic. No, buy this right now and in the next 5 minutes. Just talk to them. One of the ways I like doing these conversations about what they value, and this I usually take will be off of one of those cultural elements. We say we want to have that. Okay, what does technical excellence mean? For software engineers, quality is usually pretty close to our heart, right? So how do we define software quality? But have some dedicated time for that discussion and let people think and prepare for it a little bit. I really like to use the liberating structure conversation cafe for this, because it allows a reasonably large group to all get together, everyone have a moment to share their thoughts. We get the loud voices not dominating the conversation, the quiet voices get to jump in, and we together get to learn from each other's perspective and to discuss some of the novel things we're hearing and ways we could work it out here. I've been able to do this twice, and it usually only takes about an hour. Try and make it a team lunch. Have it be an event. Because at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is just ask them. That does, however, leave us with one challenge, because we've been talking about moving groups of people. But as I mentioned with my 2-year-old, I can't make him do anything. He has to choose to do it for himself. And so let's take a moment and consider a special case. Because it's not always that we'll have team members who are loud and boisterous like me in front of the stage, happy to tell you, as long as you'd like, everything we believe. You're going to have some quieter folk. Maybe they're not as comfortable. Maybe they don't truly believe that you're being open and honest with them. Maybe they're worried about the other shoe dropping. So I want to give you this note on belonging. Identity has to precede behavior. I have to believe something about myself before I will behave in a certain way. I could believe I'm a failure, and so I will react to failure as a judgment on my character and a recertification of I am, in fact, the lowest of men. That is not a very positive reinforcing cycle, but if I believe it, that's the story I'll tell myself. I might believe that I am just a new lowly junior dev and I have no idea what I'm doing. And so it's not good of me to share my ideas on what this team culture ought to be. Let me listen to my superiors. That happens. And it's not all negative. But if someone believes that they belong in that conversation, if they don't believe that their contribution will be respected, honored, valued, they ain't going to act like it. And we have no reason to expect them to. They're not going to waste their breath. They're not going to expose themselves to ridicule, to vulnerability, to something that is uncomfortable without a lot of cajoling. So instead, remember that the new members on your team, the disengaged players, the people who have become somewhat jaded, are going to need extra care when we do this. So when you go and set up those conversations, be it in your retrospectives or a team lunch, bear that in mind. And don't design a system that requires perfect participation, mostly because you're not going to get it. But also because that's not fair to the people you're trying to serve. Some of your team members just cannot get there. Is it their fault? Meh. Everyone comes at life with a slightly different perspective. You've got pessimists, you've got optimists, you've got people who call themselves realists, which I really think are just a variation of a pessimist, but everyone comes at this world different. we, in extending dignity and respect, ought to try and account for portions of that. Let them have their say. Let them have their say in a way that they can. That might be allowing your Indian colleagues to have a little longer to frame their idea, to try one or two versions in English until they can get just right what they were really saying. That might mean handing a marker, a whiteboard marker, to the junior dev and say, hold on, I didn't understand that. Can you draw it for me? But recognize that they have to believe before they can contribute in this way. And it's not on you to create the belief. But if you're going to be the influence here, it is up to you to be aware of the need and to make space and allowance for it. Now, rounding our bend as we kind of come towards the end of this talk here, I get this question a lot. So this culture thing, it's a once and done, right? I have this conversation and then I'm off for the races. I never have to think about it again. No. Culture needs to be built little by little. You might have that vision of out in the mountains, but your first step isn't going to take you from the beach onto the rocky precipice of the tallest, highest peak. Not going to happen. You need to do it step by step, little by little, drop by drop. And over time, you'll be able to build the culture you want. But that's why I tell you, it's going to be intentional, little iterative work. Start with where you are today. Identify a couple steps you could take, right? You just need the now and next, the future fuzzy, and the way out there foggy. You want to get the team all seeing that there is that mountain that they want to climb in the distance, and agreeing that the next step they ought to take is forward, or at least in the direction of the mountain. Heck, as long as they're moving generally in that direction, at this stage, that's better than standing still. But it's going to take time, it's going to take work, and it's going to take repeated work. You're not going to get there in a quarter. I mean, I've seen teams run and make surprising progress in a quarter, but they're never always to the mountain that they've envisioned. That's okay. It won't change overnight. But here's an interesting aspect. Just like with filling a bucket, over time, you'll eventually fill the bucket. And there will be that one last drop. You go from the floor is dry, but there's water in the bucket, to there is now water on the floor and in the bucket. There will be that incremental buildup that feels like it is slow and we're not making any progress. Don't panic. Resist the urge to joggle the bucket, to make it go faster. Let it build up its steam, let it build up its momentum, because there will be a turning point where we went from almost there, can't see it, to holy cow, we're going way faster than we thought we could. And that's okay. But you got to allow the time for that. And you got to resist the urge to jump in and change things while you're trying to make the flow go faster. We don't want to jerk people around and send them all over the place. We want to align the path to that's the mountain. How do we take the steps to get there? And let them to build the habits, the mindset, the value understanding through practice at the pace that their identity will allow. Because everyone's going to get there at a different time. The people who have been around the mountain before and have seen that whole jazz of, yeah, we're going to write a new clean culture, sure, are going to take a long time to come around. But there will be that moment when they start seeing something worthwhile. But the more we try and focus on, hey, have you come around yet? Hey, have you come around yet? Hey, have you come around yet? The more we're going to annoy them. And the less likely they are to try and participate. Because they know that our intent at that point is, hurry up and participate, rather than, hey, are you doing okay? You got what you need? So we can't afford to focus just on, is the culture there yet? Is the culture there yet? Don't worry. It will get there as the people develop to that place. So focus on helping the people do well to enact the values that they state they have. And we'll make progress towards it. And of course, then that leads us to this big question. How do we effectively keep our ideal culture and the associated behaviors in mind? How do I consistently put that here so that we can remember what we said we wanted to be? When I was young, and in my parents' home, I had posters of superheroes. And they would say things like justice or freedom or any number of big thoughts, these ideals. And like any kid, I thought it was really neat to, wrap my blanket around my neck and dress up like my superhero and superhero pose it. But there was a reason why that mattered. As a kid, I was pretending to be something I wanted to be in the future. I was pretending that I had the intelligence, the strength of those heroes. And I had those posters in my room to remind me. Even to this day, one of my favorite superheroes is Captain America. And I'm partial to the Chris Evans portrayal of the character because of what I believe he represents. And so I've got a little movie memorabilia from the first Captain America movie in the Marvel cycle right now. His little actual shield-shaped Captain America shield, the one he gets before he gets the vibranium one. And there goes my nerd card. But I keep that on my desk because I want to remember how he led. His care for people, his frank and upright approach to everyday work and righteousness. I want to remember that because I want to portray it when I'm working with others. This creation of a memento, of a reminder, is critically important and is something your team really should do. Oftentimes, Agile teams will do that for things that they intend for their process. Things like the definition of done or the team working agreement. Enshrining those beliefs is important. Why not use a similar mechanism to enshrine the beliefs that your team has about what they want to work on and remind them of it consistently? Review it just before you do sprint planning or before any natural cycle occurs to say, hey, let's remember, this is who we are or who we are striving to be. That might be a motto. I mean, if that floats your boat, go for it. That might be like 3 big images, or it might be like we do at Improving with 3 big words written on our office walls: dedication, excellence, involvement. Because we want not necessarily to drill it into someone's head, but to make it an omnipresent thing in our day-to-day work. In summary, behaviors build culture. By your actions, you create what you become. Positive dynamics and better performance are directly correlated. Strong positive cultures have been statistically shown to be more productive, to produce less bugs, and to naturally grow faster. And so as a result, we are really interested in building these better dynamics. And the good news is you can. The culture comes from the dynamics and the mindset or the values that the people in that group hold and act on. Because if you don't intentionally act on it, you're going to go to a low maintenance mode. Whatever it is you accept, that's your minimum bar. What you correct against and what you encourage tells you the direction you're going to go. And you need to be active in these things so that the repeated behaviors are the ones that take you where you want to go and are not merely the ones that are easy. And the last thing you have to remember is that this is not an individually owned thing. But as a good news, that means you don't have to be the leader to get it done. But the behaviors can be intentionally changed and must require the attention of the team who has to do them. They have to own this change, because if it's not who they are, it's not their culture. Help them to see that, help them to build the new pattern, help them to behave themselves into the culture that they desire to be. And to get it started, all you have to do is ask a question. And so with that, I would like to open the floor to any additional questions, because that is the core of our content today.
All right, we do not have any questions in the Q&A, but just a quick reminder, if you'd like to ask your questions live, make sure to raise your hand and I will unmute you in the chat. We'll give everyone a second. See if we've got any questions. All right. Well, while anybody, if you think of anything, feel free to keep your hands raised, and Daniel will be here for another couple minutes. But I just wanted to say, before we part ways, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. This is a fantastic presentation. I cannot wait to go back into my own office and start implementing some of these ideas with my team. Of course,
Fantastic.
again, working towards the future. This is not going to happen overnight, but it's a good diligent practice.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Any final thoughts from you, Daniel? It looks like we've got, oh, we did have a QA come through. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Ryan.
So I will summarize this thing once more just to help you guys take it with you. Behaviors build culture. Identity precedes behavior. Therefore, have conversations with your group, have them actively, and work little by little over time with your team to produce the culture you want to be part of. Thank you guys for joining me very much. And I'd encourage you to stick around for a brief preview of what's going to come up next week, because the next topic in the Improving Talk series actually will build on this pretty well.
Absolutely. Well, and then again, thank you for joining. For anybody who wants to continue to follow Daniel on any of his writings, Daniel Schofler, you can find him at the improving.com thoughts page. He's a regular thought leader, and as well as make sure to follow Daniel on LinkedIn. There's a lot of great content, and you'll be able to ask questions or any follow-up items from there. Yep. Again, improving.com has a full list of our virtual lunch and learns. As noted, we do provide these every Wednesday at noon Central. And next week will be a really exciting talking about understanding ourselves by Bethany Hilton. So we're going to review to start how we review internally, talk about our identity, and acknowledge our work and through subconscious programming. So another exciting talk coming up. Again, Daniel, thank you for joining. I know I will continue to follow you and your blogging on LinkedIn. And for everybody else, have a fantastic day. Stay warm out there, and we'll see you on February 8th.
Hoorah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good afternoon.